Picture this: a lone rider silhouetted against a fiery sunset, a dusty main street, the tense quiet before a high-noon duel. This is the Wild West of our imagination, a world forged in Hollywood studios and pulp novels. But what if I told you that almost everything you think you know about this iconic era is a myth? What if the real story is far more complex, more surprising, and ultimately more human? Let's start with the quintessential symbol of the West, the cowboy. We picture rugged, independent heroes like John Wayne, roaming the open range with nothing but their horse and their six-shooter. The reality? Most cowboys weren't grizzled Anglo sharpshooters. They were young, often in their late teens or early 20s. A significant number, perhaps as many as 1 in 4, were African American, former slaves seeking a new life after the Civil War. Many more were Mexican vaqueros, the original cowboys from whom Americans learned the trade, from the ropes, the saddles, to the very language itself. Words like lariat, rodeo, and even buckaroo all come from Spanish. These weren't gunslinging adventurers. They were overworked, underpaid laborers on long, grueling cattle drives that were more about grit and endurance than glamour and gunfights. And what about those gunfights? The legendary shootouts in the street? Forget what you've seen in the movies. The idea of two men facing off at high noon was almost entirely a fictional invention. Gun violence was certainly a part of life, but it was often messy, chaotic, and fueled by alcohol. Most Wild West towns like Dodge City or Tombstone had strict gun control laws. You were often required to check your firearms at the sheriff's office upon entering town limits. In fact, historical records show that in the most famous cow towns during their wildest years, the annual murder rate was surprisingly low, often fewer than 5 homicides per year. You were statistically more likely to die from a disease like cholera, or even a simple accident, than in a blaze of glory. Let's talk about the famous figures. Billy the Kid, for instance, is painted as a cold-blooded outlaw, a prolific killer with 21 notches on his belt. The historical Billy, Henry McCarty, was likely responsible for killing around 4 to 9 men, mostly in self-defense or during the chaotic Lincoln County War. He was a teenager, described by those who knew him as being rather affable and even charming, not the hardened monster of legend. He was a product of a violent, lawless environment, not its cause. Similarly, Wyatt Earp's reputation as a heroic lawman is largely a product of a biography written long after his death, which polished his often murky history. The famous gunfight at the OK Corral? It didn't even happen at the OK Corral. It was in a vacant lot down the street. And it wasn't a clear-cut case of good versus evil. It was a 30-second explosion of violence stemming from a complex local feud involving politics, family rivalries, and business disputes. It was brutal, close quarters, and over in a flash. Nothing like the choreographed duels on screen. Perhaps the biggest myth is the idea of an empty, untamed wilderness waiting to be conquered. The West was not empty. It was home to hundreds of diverse and sophisticated Native American nations, each with its own culture, language, and history stretching back millennia. The story of westward expansion is not one of brave pioneers taming a wilderness. It is a story of invasion, broken treaties, and the systematic destruction of entire ways of life. The Indian Wars were not noble battles against savage foes, but often brutal campaigns of displacement and extermination. This part of the story, filled with tragedy and resilience, is often sidelined in favor of the more romantic cowboy narrative. And what about the women of the West? They weren't just saloon girls or helpless damsels in distress. They were homesteaders, entrepreneurs, doctors, teachers, and ranchers who worked alongside men, facing the same hardships and demonstrating incredible fortitude. Women like Calamity Jane were the exception, not the rule. Most were ordinary people doing extraordinary things to build lives for themselves and their families in a challenging new world. Their stories are a crucial, yet often overlooked part of the true history of the American West. So why do these myths persist? Because they tell a powerful story about America itself, a story of independence, self-reliance, and the triumph of civilization over savagery. It's a simple, compelling narrative. But the truth, as we've seen, is far messier and more fascinating. The real West was a multicultural melting pot of incredible diversity. It was a place of immense hardship and incredible opportunity, where cowboys were laborers, gunfights were rare, and the land was already home. By peeling back the layers of myth, we don't diminish the story of the West. We enrich it, revealing a truer, more complete picture of this pivotal chapter in history. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey into the real Wild West. If you found this as fascinating as we do, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical deep dive. We'll see you in the comments.